Let's now bring in the Nelson Mandela Foundation. It's sent its heartfelt condolences to the British royal family following the passing of Queen Elizabeth II. Now, the foundation says she served her country tirelessly, consistently, and with great dignity. Now, the foundation has recalled the close relationship that a former SA President Nelson Mandela had developed with the Queen, where he hosted her in South Africa and visited her in England. Sello Hatang is a Nelson Mandela Foundation CEO. He joins us now live via Zoom. Mr. Hatang, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. In fact, that relationship was so close between the former President Nelson Mandela and the Queen that he referred her by her first name and even conferred on her the name of Tlalipula. You know, talk to us about that personal relationship between the late Queen Elizabeth II and, of course, President Mandela.
Thank you very much, Nati. And I think for us, there's no doubt that this is a big moment for the whole world, not just for the British people. And as the global community, we are observing the end of an era and the beginning of another one. And I think, if anything, we need to convey our deepest condolences again to the people of Britain and to the family and friends of Queen Elizabeth. The Queen was a friend of the Nelson Mandela Foundation and a friend of Madiba. And one remembers the moments which were dear, which we were told about from people like Ahmed Kathrada, who said that he once walked in the office to find Madiba talking to someone saying Elizabeth this and Elizabeth that. And after a while, he kept on thinking, I hope it's not the Queen. And when Madiba was done and he dropped the phone, he asked her, who was that? Madiba said, it's Queen Elizabeth. And he asked, but why did you say Elizabeth? Shouldn't you be saying Queen Elizabeth or Her Majesty? And Madiba said, well, she calls me Nelson. Surely I can also call her Elizabeth. And that's kind of the relationship they had. You reflected on him rather, conferring the name Motlalepula to her after she had visited South Africa. She was visiting Madiba in 1995, and during that visit, we had torrential rains, and it was that rain that then led to Madiba saying she brought the rain to the African continent. You then don't confer such a name just, but you confer it because of the special relationship we enjoy with someone.
And, you know, ironically, on the day of her passing and in the evening, you would see, even in the morning of Friday, you know, it was raining, but mourners came in, you know, no less during the rain. And again, it just plays on that name. But on another matter now, the Queen leaves a huge but very complex legacy, so much so that her passing has received mixed reactions, not only, you know, in South Africa, but across, you know, the globe, where some are choosing to mourn, you know, her loss, but others are choosing to use her passing to highlight her contributions to colonialism and also a tragic period in this country and, of course, the continent. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's important that when we reflect on these things, Sonati, we need to always ask ourselves about institutions that exist, the head of which was the Queen. So when you attack an institution like that, it's to attack it to say an injustice has been done. We need to fix it. And if we can build a world that's more conscious about the damage caused by colonialism, maybe this is an important moment for us to do so. However, while we're doing so, we need to also be self-reflecting about what needs to be done to build a different world, the world that cares about the vulnerable and the poor, without necessarily saying forget about the past. But we should try and say, how do we ensure that we don't fall into that trap of wanting to always argue about the past, hope for the better past, but rather to say the future beckons. How do we build on that future? And that future, of course, is a painful one. We are wounded people, but those wounds should then not paralyze us into inaction in terms of wanting to do better and do good by the poor and the vulnerable. And a moment like this, globally, I've seen the reflections that come from Jakarta and many other countries in India. You can see that there's a level of anger. That should be allowed too. 96 years comes with complexity. A legacy this big, this wide, this deep will always attract some kind of negativity and a lot of positivity too. Nelson Mandela was not immune to that. And we must not forget that Madiba himself, when he passed on at the age of 95, he did attract that kind of negativity. So what do you do with that energy is the question we should ask ourselves. Well, what do we do to make sure that we build on those legacies? They set the foundation. It could have started off badly for her through colonialism, but she did demonstrate that fundamentally that democracy should be something that we advocate for and that it works. Even as a figurehead in the UK, it ended up being that we must build democracy that works for the poor, that capitalism should begin to be more caring and not just extractive. And those are questions we should be asking us. To the British government, we should also be saying it can't be that a moment as critical as this, that we must hold the mirror close to our faces and ask ourselves, what are we doing in terms of refugees, the plight of refugees? Why would you send refugees to Rwanda, for example? It tells you that we haven't learned any lessons as a British government. And I think if we are to do anything with in honor of the Queen, is to look at ourselves closely as a global community and say, what do we need to do better than the hair past in order for the future that's beckoning to be better?
Just on that point, as we self-reflect and also look into a better future, talk to us about the kind of role that you would see or you would want to see Britain's King Charles playing going forward in terms of what his role is, in forging a new future and reconciling all the wrongs that you speak of. Because at this point in time, it would seem that every time we have a development as it relates to this particular monarchy, we will have these kind of questions that are being asked in terms of what are our leaders or supposed leaders doing, and what can we do to make sure that they do what they are supposed to do in terms of serving the people and doing what's right.
I hope that King Charles III will come in with a view of reckoning, doing some reckoning work. And that reckoning work begins with Britain asking herself, in terms of colonialism, the damage caused by colonialism, how do we do right by those countries that were damaged by colonialism? And I think doing right starts also with ensuring that there are people who have been calling for an apology, for example, to say maybe people should reckon with that past by ensuring that the monarchy, British monarchy, says something wrong was done. Wrong was done to the continent of Africa and to many other parts of the world. How do we then reckon, do the reckoning work? And I hope that would be one of the first things he'll do when he gets into office, to try to do the reckoning work. But we should also be people who, through the Commonwealth, for example, we could use that platform to say, this is the damage caused. These are wounds that are still to be healed. How do we heal them? How do we ensure that the work that Madiba and Queen Elizabeth started of ensuring that we look at ourselves differently as a people, that kind of work is done. And until such time that we do that, Sisunati, unfortunately, we're going to be troubled forever. And every time the monarchy, there's something that happens with the monarchy, you'll find this bitterness that then comes through and the anger that comes through. And I think that anger should also be given space to breathe too, by the way. So it shouldn't be suppressed in any way. It should be given space to breathe.
No, absolutely. Mr. Sello Hatang, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Mr. Hatang is the CEO of the Nelson Mandela Foundation.